Welcome everyone to this third day of SupTech Week. We are delighted to have you, and I'm Drew Propson. I head up our technology and innovation and financial services work at the World Economic Forum. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by three expert panelists for this next session, which is the first of the day. And we will be focusing on practical steps to advancing RegTech and SupTech concurrently. I think being SupTech Week, you've seen over the sessions over the last 2 days that most of these have really focused specifically on supervisory technology or digital transformation to be enhancing financial supervision. This session is going to then also take a look at the relationship between RegTech, so regulatory technology, and SupTech. Looking forward to a very engaging conversation with our three panelists. We have with us today Deborah Young, who is the CEO of the RegTech Association. We have Curtis Matlock, who's the CEO of Proto, and we have Luay, Gadallah, who is the Chief Technology Officer of EastNets. So welcome to you all. As we start off here, I think it would be really interesting for all to hear a little bit more about your relationship to RegTech and SupTech from your organization's perspective, and then where you really think that, perhaps we need to be doing a little bit of more work to advance the two together. So I will start off with you, Curtis, please.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks to all the fellow panelists and yourself, Drew, for joining us bright and early here in I think New York City today, but everyone else is around the world. So for my own experience and for Proto, my company's experience, we do AI-based consumer protection, mainly around complaints handling, case management. So there's a RegTech element to that and SupTech, of course, and quite often they are overlapping. So there's a compliance factor for financial institutions to have complaint systems in place to be sharing their data, especially for consumer recourse or complaints that are being escalated. And then for the supervisors, they need to have tools to see the health of financial consumer protection in their countries. So that these are dashboards, these are ways to automatically refer complaints between regulated entities, and then to monitor the resolution. So the conversation that happens between the consumer and the regulated entity. So I see a big challenge to this is both sides of this technology moving forward in parallel. Then also with supervisors, especially reinventing the wheel. So it would be great to see more whole of government approaches, which I'll go into a little bit later in the panel, to this technology where agencies are using it as a shared service, making it easier for regulated entities, especially those with multiple regulators, to comply. And it's easier for consumers then to find these tools as well. I'll pause there and hand over to the other panelists.
Great. Thank you, Curtis. Deborah, over to you, please.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Curtis. So my journey to RegTech and SupTech probably commenced more years than I care to mention ago when I worked in investment banking. And I saw at that time how critical it was for all parts of the ecosystem to be able to come together to prosecute for better standards and global approaches. And also it was back at the early part of my career when technology was really, starting to emerge as something that was going to change the way that we did things beyond big red books, which was how I used to manage the risk of the bank that I worked for in a series of paper-based books. And so my career journey has actually come full circle in being able to help establish the RegTech Association 7 years ago as a non-profit industry body, championing the world's very best regulatory technology, that can fundamentally change the way that we work, manage the risks, protect customers and the overall system. And I think in relation to RegTech and SupTech, we are very much of the view that they are two sides actually of the same coin, and the nuance is really about the user. But we would absolutely say that it is really critical that they do work in tandem and that they are connected, and that everybody has a really good understanding of what the applications are and what they can do and the risks that they're meant to mitigate. So for sure, critical that they work in tandem.
Excellent. Thank you, Deborah. Luay, would love to hear from you, please.
Thank you, Drew. At EastNets, we are at the intersection of technology and compliance and regulatory oversight. We provide solutions that serve the need of all of the above. So myself as a CTO of EastNets, I oversee the development of tools that bridge the gap between institutions and regulators. As I see it, RegTech provides financial institutions with different technology to comply efficiently with the regulations. SupTech, on the other hand, equips regulators with tools to effectively complete the oversight cycle. So these two domains, obviously, they interconnected vis-a-vis the advancement in RegTech. It enables smoother regulatory compliance, which in turn allows SupTech solutions to focus on the broader oversight goals. So at EastNets, we support both through AI-driven real-time monitoring, streamlining, and workflows. So really, advancing RegTech and SupTech together ensures a resilient, efficient financial ecosystem where institutions and regulators can collaborate seamlessly to mitigate risks and enhance compliance. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Luay. I'm going to pull on that a little bit harder and ask all three of you another question that's related. One, I know that you all have been experimenting, or you've done some recent research that really highlights the current state of RegTech and SupTech. But more importantly, I want you to look at this sort of ideal scenario 4 or 5 years out. Where should we be ideally in 5 years for both RegTech and SupTech if we're thinking about both the development and the deployment, as well as the relationship between the two? So I'll come back to you, Deborah, to start us off, please.
Thanks. So we've just completed a piece of global research on RegTech and SupTech, and it's called Industry Perspectives Report, and I will pop it up in the resources section for people to download if they wish. We surveyed regulators, regulated institutions, RegTech, SupTechs, and consultants to form this global view. We are seeing currently very high adoption rates of both RegTech and SupTech. 50% of regulators have onboarded a solution in the last 2 years, and 33% reported that they're in the process of adopting right now. Prioritization of RegTech and SupTech is of medium to high priority to regulators, and they are very and generally well engaged with the broader industry, thanks to forums exactly like we're at today. We are seeing some fundamental shifts around things like fraud and scams. That's jumped from number 7 on top risks into the top 5 this year for the first time, up near its cousin, financial crime. Institutions are very focused on their customers right now, and this is for the 2nd year running. Probably not surprising given the number of cyber concerns, privacy data, open banking in some jurisdictions, and the rise of fraud and scams as well. 26% of RegTechs have achieved more than 30% revenue growth in the last year. Capital does remain constrained, which is really important to the industry, but it does remain a little bit constrained. However, there has been more private equity activity, which is usually a sign of a maturing industry. 62% of RegTechs and SupTechs have achieved between 1 and 10 deployments in the past year, with the highest concentration sitting in the range of 4 to 10 deployments, and appetite has remained strong. I think what is quite interesting is some of the new industry sectors that are emerging as RegTech adopters, and they include government, healthcare, and telco. One of the things that we track over time is the time to value, and that is the time from the first conversation to a full deployment. And back in 2019, that was an average of 13 months. That came down last year to 8 months, and similarly, this past year has also flattened out at around that 8 months mark. Now, I must say that is an average. Some solutions will take much longer, and some will be shorter than that. The question of SupTech versus RegTech and where it might go, my view might be a little bit controversial. and sometimes I find it's not helpful to treat them in isolation, because they do need to kind of work in tandem as we, evolve. But they are actually both cross-vertical solutions, and that may be a little bit controversial for me to say in what is a financial services audience, but many of these applications can be used in other industries. So the future for RegTech and SupTech may actually bounce out from financial services and cross over into other sectors. And just to have a little giggle for us to finish on, the biggest question really is it SupTech or SupTech? Because half the world says SupTech and the other half say SupTech. Personally, I say SupTech, but that is a question I'll leave hanging for someone else to answer.
Well, I'm happy to start out on that one, Deb, because we were having this conversation yesterday evening for some of our in-person sessions here in New York City. And we decided that it really is not even dependent by region. Some people say SupTech, some people say SupTech, but there's no rhyme or reason to say one or the other. Both are perfectly correct. So,
very good.
I might just switch between the two. Make sure everybody understands what we're talking about today.
Fantastic.
I did see, Luay, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but I did see in the chat a question about access to the report. Deb, feel free to just put the link in the chat, or we can also upload the report to the materials. So good. Yeah. Luay, I would love to hear from your perspective where we currently are with RegTech and SupTech, and where we would ideally be in about 5 years' time.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, very informative information from that very objective view. I wholeheartedly agree with pretty much everything that she said. I believe that currently RegTech and SupTech are both on a growth trajectory, but their adoption, in my view, is uneven across regions and industries. So RegTech, for example, has made significant progress in areas like transaction monitoring and fraud detection, but challenges like data silos and inconsistent regulatory frameworks remains to be an issue. So SupTech, on the other hand, who can, they should be really leveraging tools like predictive analytics and data aggregation, is still evolving in its integration with the financial institutions. So I would say in 5 years' time, the ideal scenario, in my view, would be seamless integration between RegTech and SupTech, supported by global data standardization and interoperable technology, widespread use of AI and machine learning, and to predict and prevent risk and the like. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Curtis, same to you. Where are we today, and where should we be in 5 years?
Yeah, so largely echo what Luay said, but maybe add some more, a more actual practical example from our own experience in the Philippines. I see SupTech and RegTech largely merging into the same really fast to deploy solution. I think they are two sides of the same coin, and not to throw more acronyms out, but we just sort of see it as GovTech in general for whole of government. So going well beyond financial consumer protection now. The same technology that we built around chatbots for AI-based complaint management is beyond just financial products and services now. It's doing everything from chainsaws to just general coconuts, just random products, the things that you wouldn't even fathom, that could be the nature of a complaint. And this is under the context of a new law in the Philippines called the Internet Transactions Act, covering all of e-commerce. So any kind of transaction that happens online is now covered by this law. It's a mandate held by the Department of Trade and Industry, and it covers anywhere between 30 to 50 government agencies, requiring them all to use the same tools, SupTech and RegTech tools, integrated between agencies for automatic referral of complaints and then tracking of resolution across the entire country. So I think solutions of that nature, that level of ambition, hopefully will be mainstream 5 years from now, and we can move away from these sort of small interventions, these pilots where it's not clear if it's RegTech or SupTech, and then sometimes they don't scale. So I think, on the legislative side, laws, acts like the Internet Transactions Act, hopefully those can become ubiquitous.
Great. Thanks particularly for the specific example. And I think you started to answer the next question I have for you all, which is linking back to the title of this session. What are some real practical steps that we need to be taking to get to this ideal sort of 5-year out scenario. And related to this, then, who are the key actors that we need to make sure are involved from public sector and private sector? Luay, I'll come to you first, please.
Yeah. So yeah, great question. So the ideal scenario really requires multi-stakeholder approach with clear and deliberate actions. Some of these actions include but not limited to establishing global standards for data sharing and interoperability. So obviously, this is easier said than done. This is very difficult to do, but in my view, this is one of the most important things. Second would be to create a regulatory sandbox to test and refine innovative technologies and in a controlled environment. This gives a comfort level to both regulator and the financial institutions into try things that are new, that are unknown to them. Also, I cannot emphasize enough, we really need to invest in the capacity building to ensure institutions and regulators have the skills to adapt to the use of advanced tools like AI and beyond AI even. So that's really one of the most important things. So I believe, the key actors include regulators, financial institutions, technology providers, international bodies like FATF or BIS, which can provide necessary framework and guidelines for all of the above. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Curtis, anything to add on that front?
Yeah, I think in addition to all those actors, I would add that where we are right now in the industry, especially in emerging markets, is more of an experimental stage of making SupTech or RegTech or both more scalable, getting beyond these pilot projects from a technical perspective into production scale solutions. So I think a real party here at this point is organizations like the Gates Foundation, other philanthropy organizations who can come in and provide a basis of support, certain subsidization of this technology for a limited period of time. And that allows the supervisors, regulators, any government agency to at least see the impact, the value, start to integrate with each other, and then over time take over that software license or whatever the business model is for that particular technology. So that's what I'm most excited about right now in the industry, is this opportunity to get to scale in partnership with the historical philanthropy partners who would give small grants for pilots. We're now thinking on a bigger scale.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Deb, anything from your side to add?
Yeah, just to build on that, I couldn't agree more with the institutions that have just been mentioned. We must collaborate and we must work in unison. And, part of the reason that we established the RegTech Association is that in the first place was, we just wanted to try and accelerate adoption of the technology, but we realized that we needed to create a safe space. And that is a safe space for all of the community to come, the ecosystem to come, to create that dialogue and to surface those conversations, and for people to be able to unpack the potential because people don't know what they don't know, and there's new technology being born every day. And so the challenge in that safe space is, being able to engage with the academics and the economic and the development agencies. And Curtis just mentioned, organizations like the Gates Foundation, government, regulators, financial institutions, and tech and large tech, as well as the small tech, which tend to be the people in our sphere. But we need to create that safe space for us to be able to interact. And we almost need to remove some of the sales out of it and elevate the imperative of this technology to actually bring stability and trust to the system.
Yeah, Deb, I'm going to double down on what you just said and come back to you actually with my next question. So certainly, if we're not intentional about coordination and collaboration, we're going to miss a lot of opportunities here to be advancing both RegTech and SupTech. And you've started to outline a little bit what needs to happen, having this safe space. For those on the line, I think we have an audience that is very varied in terms of expertise and organizations they're coming from. Any sort of immediate term steps that others might be able to take to drive greater collaboration, depending upon where they're coming from within the ecosystem?
Yeah, so lean into your local RegTech, or if it's a fintech. I don't think there is a SupTech association yet. But I would lean into networks like that because they can be enormously helpful for that safe connectivity piece that I've been talking about. Really using forums like what CCAF and the SupTech Lab have created. Here we're lucky to have forged a strong bond with them over the years, because the sharing of this knowledge is really, really important. So I think leaning in and not underestimating the power of your local industry body and what that can do for you is a really, really good start. And what we have found is by taking the sales out of our discussions has helped our industry enormously advance much further up the food chain than they would otherwise have been, because they would still be locked out in an expo hall somewhere, not allowed to go into the main conference discussion because they're seen as software vendors. And so we're trying to get away from that. So really trying to lean into strategic conversations, and your local industry association is a good place to start.
Good advice. Thank you. Luay, EastNets, of course, operates across a lot of different jurisdictions. So you're across the globe here. What are maybe some of your thoughts on collaboration? Are there some differences and some similarities that you're observing maybe across the regions that you're working in regarding SupTech and RegTech developments and adoption? And where would you see maybe collaboration could be enhanced a little bit more?
Sure. So indeed, at EastNets, we're operating across diverse regions, and we observe both similarities and differences in how SupTech and RegTech are being adopted. So from a similarity point of view, it includes we see a universal need for fraud detection across almost all regions. Also, another thing, compliance automation, false positive reduction, and real-time monitoring. So these are the similarities. However, from a differences point of view, it often arises from local regulatory priorities. The technology maturity and resource availability dictates a lot of that. For instance, some regions, they emphasize on privacy, data protection, while other regions, they focus on financial crime prevention. So enhancing cross-border collaboration, in my view, requires creating harmonized data standards, fostering knowledge sharing platforms, and establishing cross-border regulatory sandboxes to test interoperable solutions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Luay. And Curtis, you also work across jurisdictions here. Any thoughts from your side? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so we mainly focus on emerging markets or developing economies. And I think one thing to flag is that whether it's a RegTech or a SupTech solution, it has to actually be available to consumers. And so with our clients, we're really focused on this concept of a no wrong door policy. Quite often consumers, when they've suffered a fraud or a scam, they don't actually know who the regulator is. They don't know that there's a recourse option. And so making that more readily available, right? This could be a combination of things like laws like the Internet Transactions Act in the Philippines, which is requiring consolidated software systems that are really fast to deploy for regulators. It could also just be mandates as well that require regulated entities, financial institutions to actually host these recourse systems. So it could be chatbots, even just web forms, any kind of tool that is more readily accessible to consumers. So I think that's an area for expanded collaboration, is figuring out, okay, we're going to work together, but specifically within this work, are we putting the consumer first? Is it going to be readily accessible within the apps that they use, like WhatsApp, Messenger, or if they are going to have to go searching online, are we breaking down those barriers where they could be talking to the wrong regulator, and indeed they could easily get referred to the right one?
Yeah, thanks so much, Curtis. I actually want us to switch gears and talk a little bit more about specific technologies in a second. But before we do, I see some questions in the chat here that it looks like there's quite a few individuals that would support and would like to know more about. I'm going to start with the last one, which is there any international body which coordinates the efforts of all regulatory bodies, technology providers, as well as standard setting bodies. And Deb, I see you put in here the link for RegTech Global. Anything else do you want to add on that or elaborate?
Yeah, there are a number of, in fact, on the homepage of our website, you can download a map of the ecosystem that we've painted there, and included there are some other bodies. To my knowledge, we're probably the only one at the moment, and we do not have everybody. I'm saying that flat out. We don't have everybody. I would love to have everybody. It's a work in progress, but I would regularly meet with US regulators, the UK regulator, and Australian regulators on a quarterly basis. And so we are engaging those groups around the world. So I just, if the person who asked the question wanted to reach out, happy to put you in touch. But we're doing the best we can to attempt to do that. But regulators tend to be stakeholders of our organisation rather than members. Also, to be clear, that we don't have regulators that are members. It's more the technology companies and the financial institutions that are actually members.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to skip to a couple other questions here as well. The first one that came up is, can a regulator suggest a RegTech to the regulated entities or mandate the regulated entities to use one? Is that something you all have come across, and has that worked well, if so?
I can probably just jump in there. A couple of years ago in Australia, there was a very famous statement by one of Australia's regulators, and they said, they basically made the statement and said, if not, why not? And so the regulator had done a lot of work around educating themselves on the RegTech solutions in the market. In fact, they actively invite RegTechs to come and meet with them one-on-one, so that they're actually quite well educated on the solutions and what the solutions can do. And so when they are placed in a position with one of the institutions where it looks like they might be lacking in an area, the regulators certainly are very well versed in the RegTech solutions and what companies could and should be using. I would say that they will never endorse a product, though. They will never endorse a product. So they'll never tell somebody you have to be using this. But they may say there are solutions that solve that problem, and I strongly suggest that you avail yourself of it as soon as possible.
Yeah, my view on this is that I've seen a wide range of different behavior from regulators around the world. So we see in some areas they go ahead and they test certain parameters within a particular technology or particular solution, and so they would say, this particular solution is okay for the intended purpose of the regulation that's imposed by this particular body. In other areas, we see that there is a black list of solution rather than a white list. So you cannot use these set of solutions, but you're free to use everybody else at your own risk. And the idea here is that you, as a vendor, you really need to be regulator ready. You need to prepare the financial institutions to be regulator ready at all times.
I think there's also maybe some nuance to this question as well, which I think comes from Nigeria. There are models that we've seen, especially in Africa, where governments can mandate that certain regulatory technologies are to be used if there's a SupTech element to it. So if a supervisor, like a central bank, for example, is using a certain technology to monitor consumer protection, there may be an element to that which needs to be deployed by the financial institutions for that to actually work, for it to be collecting data, for example. So within that, we've seen some countries advance that, actually create a compliance requirement where new technology, basically RegTech, is being deployed by these institutions if there's a SupTech element to it. And underneath that mandate or certain powers, it is possible to do that.
Thanks, Curtis. And I think that answers more or less the next question that came up from that same individual, which is, can an application have an embedded SupTech and RegTech at the same time so that the regulator will use the SupTech and the regulated entities use the RegTech? So it sounds like there are some linkages out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would look at Rwanda as an example of this.
Great. Thank you for that. Good. I know we have other questions in the chat, which we will see if we have time to get to, but I do want to make sure that we have a little time to talk somewhat about specific technologies here. Curtis, you lead an AI-driven company. AI, of course, is all the rage, a lot of hype around it, a lot of reality, though, as well, in terms of how it can be useful. How do you see AI potentially shifting the RegTech and SupTech landscape? Maybe what are some of the more dramatic changes, if you will, or advancements that you might see?
Yeah, so I think I spoke earlier about whole of government. So ingesting a very large amount of data across many different government agencies so that they can all use the same consumer protection tool. So this is everything from like CSV files, PDFs, these circulars that are generated. Being able to ingest that into any kind of large language model. They can even be locally hosted on. And then with that, delivering certain applications. So in our case, it's chatbots that are being trained on organizational data with a lot of prompts that's happening in the background to reduce overlap in information between all the data sources that we get. So that's one. Another one is AI gives the potential for different SupTech applications to overlap and form like a mega solution. So there's all these various tools out there. One of the things that we're working on with a client, a major regulator in Southeast Asia, is public sentiment analysis using AI tools to do scraping of social media websites, app review sites, and then correlating that to the consumer complaints that we're generating through AI-based chatbots, and having an AI system there being able to proactively alert us if there's a correlation that's worth investigation. So it could be that, in a much faster way, we're able to discover that there's a fraud or a scam in a certain product or service category against a certain financial institution or geographic region, because we've successfully correlated a spike in negative app reviews, for example, with actual real complaints that we're getting. And so it's well beyond our initial solution where we started, and it's now forming this sort of global one-stop shop capability for supervisors.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Deborah, in your report and some of your research, you have some data points on AI. Any sort of insights that you want to share from that, as well as potentially any risks that you're seeing from the use and the deployment of AI?
Yeah, indeed. So the research showed that 81% of respondents are currently using AI, which is not that surprising. 67% actively using generative AI. 73% of the respondents believe that generative AI will substantially transform the RegTech industry in the next 2 years. And 32% say it's already having considerable impact. And we are definitely anecdotally seeing evidence of this making headway in new RegTech product development and iterations of existing solutions, pivoting and using generative AI in their applications. The real risk for the vendors in the industry is doing nothing. May leave people behind, but also, it's something that gets talked about a lot, but, any artificial intelligence needs to be explainable, and regulators are certainly demanding that people need to be able to explain how they arrived at certain results in their reporting and so on and so forth. So I think sitting still and doing nothing is a mistake. Being aware of the risks of using something like generative AI, and being aware that you are going to need to explain how you arrived at your results.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And good data points there. Luay, you are CTO, so you are very well versed. This is right in your wheelhouse. You're very well versed on AI and practical uses for the technology. For those maybe in the audience, public sector or private sector, who could be a little bit less familiar with deploying AI, where should they start? And how would you go about maybe experimenting with, deploying, developing AI?
Sure. Yeah. So for organizations new to AI, I would say starting with the targeted use case, like a manageable pilot project is a practical approach in this case. So I would say begin by identifying a specific challenge that AI can address. An example would be fraud detection or false positive reduction, compliance reporting maybe. you really need to fall in love with that problem and understand it very well, define it very well. Then you can pilot AI solutions in a controlled environment to minimize the risk and learn in a phased approach how to deploy this to your production environment. You really need to also invest in educating and training the folks around the organization, and not just from the technology point of view, but really across the entire organization. And anybody that will be a potential user of this technology needs to partake into adopting to this technology and the use cases of it. So collaboration within the experienced technology providers that can help you with streamlined deployment of that AI solution. It will also ensure adherence to best practices and maybe specific regulatory compliance needs that you need to adhere to as a financial institution. They will help you with that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Luay. Maybe a follow-up question to that, and Luay, I'll start with you. Just we do hear so much about AI, right? But we don't want to forget about other technologies and tools out there that offer some, perhaps some solid solutions or steps to solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other technologies that you think, beyond AI, that really hold a lot of potential to be advancing RegTech and SupTech?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously AI, as of late, it's taken the lion's share of RegTech and SupTech improvements nowadays. So there are other technologies that are really transformative and has a transformation potential for both RegTech and SupTech. So, for example, blockchain can provide immutable record for secure and transparent compliant tracking of compliance data. It's used in a lot of applications around the world, used in many financial institutions. I would say also big data analytics. It helps financial institutions and regulators alike to process large data sets to identify different patterns or anomalies in which you can action later on. Also, I would say very practical and used everywhere APIs. It enables seamless integrations between different systems, that it improves the interoperability in real time between different systems, between regulators and financial institutions and other vendors, so on and so forth. Also, cannot forget cloud computing. It ensures scalable and efficient infrastructure for processing and storing regulatory data, and for quite a bit of you need cloud computing for AI and all the horsepower that it requires to operate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Luay. Curtis, Deborah, anything you want to add on that? Other technologies that are useful?
Yeah, I'll just add in as well that while we build really advanced, beautiful integrated solutions here, we can't lose sight of the consumers, and so that really is the last mile. How are we actually engaging them and pulling them into this? So that's just like good old-fashioned WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, the apps that the consumers are already using, where we're most likely to be able to reach them either proactively or reactively. Those need to be thought about very carefully about how they're embedded in the solution. Are we going to ingest data through PDF forms that have to be downloaded from a website, in which case we're really only reaching educated urban class, or are we going to be having more readily accessible solutions integrated into even other organizations? Health ministries, for example, in rural areas have a really good penetration that we can piggyback on to deliver these solutions.
Thanks. Okay.
I think the only thing I would add to that maybe is quantum computing, may be able to advance RegTech and SupTech applications by, supercharging the processing of large, sets of data at speed with superior encryption and safety and trust, utilizing, advanced predictive data analytics, for example, for, improving things like compliance outcomes. So that's one that I think will be interesting to see how that evolves.
Great, thanks. Yes, and maybe quantum will be the technology that we're all talking about next year. So
maybe
to see. Maybe. Good. I want to point to one maybe sort of practical application for technology or different technologies maybe on an issue that is pressing and growing. And this is fraud and scams that are on the rise, and they really pose a significant risk, of course, to individuals as well as the financial system. We have in this conversation already started to touch upon this a little bit, but what is the role of RegTech and SupTech in tackling these issues? And how can maybe technology further help improve current efforts? I'll start with Deb, actually.
Yeah, thanks. We've got a, I've got a bee in my bonnet about fraud and scams right now. So I think RegTech most definitely has a very important role to play. The problem is a global one, and listening to Curtis and his reference to consumers several times, this impacts every single one of us sitting here, our mums and dads, our brothers and sisters, our kids, you name it, it's impacting everyone. And there's a variety of data sources that actually point to the size of the problem in terms of dollars. But let's just say, because I don't want to choose the wrong one and then everyone says, no, you're using the wrong figure. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's considerable. And so many incidences we also know go unreported. So we actually don't even know how big the problem really is. And so as an organization, we're really trying to lean into this growing problem by creating opportunities for software vendors on the planet with fraud and scam solutions to come to us and participate in things that we run like challenges and our tech showcases that can show how these solutions can mitigate different parts of those risks, because we're hearing a lot about all the problems downstream and the fact that, regulators are going to start fining people and things like that, which is great. But actually, wouldn't it be excellent if we didn't allow bad people into the system to begin with? And so this is where applications around digital identity become absolutely critical, because if everybody has to validate who they are, then we won't see probably as many fake profiles as exist and as many bad actors entering the system. And finally, I'd just like to say that we have really embraced the technologists that are solving around fraud and scams, because we just believe that it's they're all financial crimes. So whether it's AML, CTF, sanctions, or whether it is fraud and scams, they are all financial crimes, and we treat them as such. So I would say that there's some great technology out there doing some fantastic things. And what we want to do is be able to shine a light on those organizations so that institutions can safeguard themselves. Oh, and consumers, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Deb. Luay, anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Deb 100%. Fraud and scams are a pressing challenge. They pose risk to financial institutions and consumers alike. RegTech equips institutions with tools for transaction monitoring, fraud detection, customer risk profiling, and the likes. Also, with SupTech, it empowers regulators to oversee and enforce anti-fraud measures. So in my view, technologies like AI and machine learning, they really can help with identifying anomalies and detect fraud in real time. While blockchain technologies, for example, they ensure secure transaction tracking. So by integrating these tools, I think a lot of institutions and regulators, they can proactively address fraud risk and reduce systematic vulnerabilities within the financial ecosystem.
Yeah, great. Excellent. I like the specificity there. Thank you. Curtis, anything from your side?
Yeah, just a final thought, not to repeat anyone else that's already spoken to this, is that I think there's a role for actual SupTech vendors to also realize the huge urgency around solving for frauds and scams. We all have largely parallel technologies, but when we put it together, it can be quite a powerful tool for supervisors. So pairing things like public sentiment analysis of app review and social media sites with complaints collection, with fraud detection systems, putting all those together and starting to put supervisors in more of a proactive position where they're getting alerts. I think as we do these integrations and put these combined solutions together, right, all the information that comes out of it may not be valuable, but it's generally the direction of travel that we need to go in. And we need to refine that working hand in hand with supervisors.
Good. I I hate that we are running out of time. This has been such a great conversation, but I want to wrap up with one final question that I imagine all online would like to know, which is where is maybe more research potentially needed to be helping advance RegTech and SupTech, or any data points that would be great for us to be gathering that might be able to help with this advancement going forward? Deb, I'll start with you.
So the SupTech Lab publish a report every year, as well as we do our own. I think what could be a really interesting exercise for our two organisations is to actually do some analytics on the many, many data points, because we can only fit so much actually into our report. We collect a lot more data than we know what to do with. So it would be really interesting, and with feedback from the good people online today, it would be interesting to see what other insights that we could gain from that. But I think it's important that we keep measuring that time to value. So how long is it going to take to deploy a solution, the number of deployments, the industries being served, what appetite there is, whether people want to buy or build is also an indicator of what's happening out there. So I think, we intend to continue to collect that data, but we're really open to working with the SupTech Lab potentially to look at the data set that we've got, because it is a very rich data set between the two of us. But I'm happy to take any ideas from anybody online today. You can reach out to me.
Thanks, Deb. Luay.
Yeah, briefly, I think more research is needed around interoperability standards. I think developing global standards ensure seamless integration across jurisdictions. I think that's one of the most important thing. ISO 222, it's a good start, but we need to build on top of that. We need to have more data standards across the world. Second, and I think also very, very important, is that having AI explainability research, we absolutely need to spend more effort there to ensure that financial institutions are regulated ready at all times. We providing researching methods to make AI systems more transparent and auditable, especially for regulatory use. Thank you.
Thanks, Luay. Curtis?
Yeah, I think research or monitoring is going to be needed for the whole of government efforts being undertaken right now. So in the Philippines, for example, with the Internet Transactions Act, it's very ambitious to consolidate 30 plus government agencies to use one RegTech SupTech solution. So seeing how that goes specifically, at the year 5 mark, seeing which agencies are still deployed with that solution, and what benefit the shared service model had. So the actual unit cost per agency being quite low when there's a scale of agencies using the same technology. I think that would allow some lower resourced government agencies to start to meaningfully deploy this technology over the long term.
Yeah, I think those are great words to wrap us up on. Curtis, Deborah, Luay, thank you so much. This has been an extremely insightful conversation. I'm sure that those online have found some really solid practical steps to take us forward. And I invite everybody to really be participating in this greater collaboration that we need to be advancing both SupTech and RegTech. So thanks all for joining. We do have another session coming up in around 10, 12 minutes. So please join us for this. It will be focusing on, it's entitled Innovation Edge, Unlocking Skills and Personal Growth. And it will be focusing on areas of focus for women leaders who are navigating innovation and leadership. So thank you again all for joining. Thank you so much, panelists. And we hope to see you all in the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.